Welcome to the 83rd Academy Awards, where we're going to be honoring films released in 2010. Now, before we get into that, I have an apology to make. In my 2002 video, I forgot to go over the animated short category, even though I've seen the movie Mike's New Car. So don't want to spend too much time on that because I'm not talking about 2002, talking about 2010, but just want to say, love Mike's New Car. Can't believe I completely glossed over it. Fun movie. But let's get into this year's animated short films. The nominees being Madagascar, Carnet de Voyage, Madagascar, A Journey Diary, Let's Pollute, The Gruffalo, Day and Night, and The Lost Thing. The only nominee here that I've seen is Day and Night, which was the short film released alongside Toy Story 3. And I must say, it is very creative and a fun little short movie about night and day being two distinct beings who kind of fight each other because of their differences. It's actually a very poetic idea. But what they end up doing is pretty enjoyable. They kind of try to prove each other like I'm better and no I'm better, and it kind of celebrates the great things that day has to offer and the great things that night has to offer. But what they end up doing with the sunrise and the sunset in the end, it's actually quite heartwarming. It's a pretty fun movie. All right, now talking about best original song. The nominees are If I Rise from 127 Hours, I See the Light from Tangled, Coming Home from Country Song, and We Belong Together from Toy Story 3. Only real snub I want to mention here is To the Sky from Legend of the Guardians, The Owls of Ga'Hoole. That song's really awesome. Would have loved to see some Owl City here. It's a really great song all around. But the first thing we're going to actually talk about is If I Rise from 127 Hours. Now, this song, it has a really nice vibe, and I really do enjoy what it does with the bass. There's a really groovy rhythm to it. But it is very different from the next songs that we're going to be talking about, which I do believe to be superior songs. The first one being I See the Light from Tangled, which is my personal favorite of these three. I actually think that this song should have won. It's very good. It's very romantic. It's a great duet that pairs very beautiful with just the scene in the movie, which is probably honestly the best scene in the movie, and it's largely because of this song. This song is a true highlight. Really should have won. It's wonderful. But the actual winner was We Belong Together from Toy Story 3, which is a good song, but it's also a credits song, which doesn't. I'm not saying that they're going based on where it is in the movie, but it just would have been cool if a movie that, like I See the Light, that actually has more of a role that plays into the plot of the story were to win over something that just plays over the credits. I also see this as kind of an apology award to Randy Newman for not giving him the Oscar for You Got a Friend in Me from the original Toy Story. But yeah, I mean, this is a good song, We Belong Together. It's pretty nice, but I See the Light is ultimately my personal favorite. The nominees for Best Original Score are 127 Hours, The King's Speech, Inception, How to Train Your Dragon, and The Social Network. Only snub I'm going to throw in here. I mean, it's not like a total snub, but I wanted to mention Tangled strictly because of the song Kingdom Dance, which is a personal favorite of mine. It's really nice, but let's get into the actual nominees, starting first with 127 Hours. My brother and I have a playlist that we dedicate completely to film scores. And while 127 Hours doesn't have any songs on it that I would consider playlist worthy, it does do a good job keeping the rhythm up and keeping a high energy film, especially in the beginning of the movie. And while it is doing its job, I do think it is ultimately the least compelling of the nominated films. Now moving on to The King's Speech. The score for The King's Speech was done by Alexander Desplat, who we talked about in the last episode for doing Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now, the best song from The King's Speech, I think, is simply just called The King's Speech by Alexander Desplat. It carries that classical tone that you really expect from a film about British royalty. It's just quite nice to listen to, and there's a piano melody that goes over it that just makes for a very soothing listen. All right, Inception. I believe that the Inception score is personally one of Hans Zimmer's best score. It just has a great use of electric guitar in the song Dream is Collapsing by Hans Zimmer, and one of the best swells I've ever heard in the song Time. It's genuinely just go give it a listen. It's such it just like fills you in. It swells and it just can kind of sweep you away. Really, I actually would have been quite happy with this movie winning. It is pretty amazing. Although I did just say that I would be okay with an Inception win. If I were to choose my personal winner here, it's got to be How to Train Your Dragon, which is one of, if not the best film score I've ever heard. It's incredibly diverse and consistent. You can capture so many different emotions and moods from the score by John Powell. This is his first nomination, I believe, which is incredible because it's just really a great piece of work. There's some really nice use of bagpipe there, which just fits well with the setting. And there's really great energy in a lot of the songs. Like This Is Burke, really, really, really great song. New Tale, as well as songs like Forbidden Friendship and Romantic Flight. While they don't have the high energy, they have such a sentimental track to them, and they carry such a great beauty with them. Forbidden Friendship specifically has this real sense of tenderness, which contrasts with what you would expect from a movie about dragons, as well as Romantic Flight, not being about the relationship between, obviously, Hiccup and Toothless, but between Hiccup and Astrid. Now, it's just the music gets you to, it just sweeps you into the emotion of the moment, whether that be something intense like New Tale or This Is Burke, or something sweet and tender like Romantic Flight or Forbidden Friendship. The Vikings Have Their Tea is also a really good song. But I haven't talked about it yet, but we gotta single out Test Drive, which is one of the most hype, energetic songs that I've heard, especially in a film score. It's one of the best there is. It really just you feel like you're riding on a dragon. Just the thrill and adventure of it just it hits you in the ears and does not let you go the whole scene. It's a spectacular ride that it takes you on. The winner of this award, however, was in fact The Social Network. And I must say, it's not a typical score win. The Oscars tend to, in my experience and opinion, they like scores that have a traditional orchestra, whereas this movie focuses more on, it has a lot of techno music. Almost sounds like dubstep on certain parts, but the most famous song from this score is Hand Covers Bruise by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. That's not like a dubstep one. It does some really, I will say, it does some very interesting things with violins and instrumentals that especially if you listen to it with headphones and it kind of bounces back between them, it sounds really interesting. And then it has a very calm piano melody that goes over it. Makes for a really nice listen. It's the most iconic and probably the best song from the score. I do really dig this score, and it is I've heard it considered by many to be one of the best scores of all time. I wouldn't go that far. I do still prefer films like How to Train Your Dragon and Inception, but this score is very good. Sound mixing nominees are True Grit, The Social Network, Salt, The King's Speech, and Inception. Let's start off first with True Grit. This isn't a movie that I was really thinking about the sound while I was watching it, which probably does mean it does a good job blending into the many different environments we get taken to. I mean, we have the woods, rivers, fires, horses, and gunshots. I mean, they all kind of flow together rather seamlessly, hence why I probably didn't even notice it. Now, The Social Network is a rather unexpected appearance, being largely a talking movie. They don't tend to be the ones that really get that much attention in the sound category, but the movie's sound mixing does actually flow pretty well with the edit of the film. It complements it a lot, especially there's the scene in the club when they're talking, and I do, even though I'm able to hear everything they're saying, it's mixed well enough to the point where I do feel like I kind of have to listen in, so it kind of places you into the setting that the characters are in without overpowering the dialogue, and I think they mix that up really, really well, actually. All right, the next nominee is The King's Speech, which is actually about sound in a way. It's all about talking and being able to be able to speak in a manner that's fluid and deliberate and sound precise. That's kind of the premise of the movie. And while the sound design is overall rather minimal, the best example of the sound mixing is the opening scene when the king is, well, he's not the king then, but spoilers, he's giving his speech. And because there's that echo, every single stutter, every single error, every single stammer he makes gets kind of reverberated and it kind of hits an extra time. So I think that was actually a really good use of sound that added to the anxiety of the speech that he's giving. But yeah, it's ultimately a bit more minimal compared to the winner of this award, Inception. Inception is deserving of this award. It's just layers on top of it. The same way that there's dreams upon dreams upon dreams, there's in the movie, there's layers of sound that are mixed together really well and seamlessly. From the blowing up of the fruit stands to the blowing up of entire buildings, to the train through the city, the flipping of cars, just everything is there's just never really any doubt in the sound. It's a pretty maximalist movie in terms of its sound, and it really takes you away on it. So it's cool to see it here. The sound editing nominees are Unstoppable, True Grit, Tron Legacy, Toy Story 3, and Inception. The snubs I want to throw out, the only one snub, and I actually probably should have mentioned this for sound mixing as well. Sound mixing and sound editing. Iron Man 2 has pretty great sound, especially compared to some of the nominees that we were just talking about. But without further ado, I'm not too passionate about that or anything. I don't actually care for that movie too much, but it sounds nice. But without further ado, let's actually talk about the first nominee here, which is True Grit. It is unusual for the sound mixing and sound editing categories to have such different lineups of movies. The only two movies that they kept are True Grit and Inception, and I must say I understand why. They are probably the best ones there. Okay, Toy Story 3. A lot of the sounds make their own unique noises, especially whether they're made out of like fluff or plastic or electronics. A lot of them are electronics and make their own sounds. Slinky, he's got his own unique sounds. The monkey, horrifying monkey, by the way. The climax of the movie has very effective sound design, but I think the scene where it shines the most is honestly the opening scene, which is like a action-packed science fiction western whose sound is very edited together in a pretty seamless manner. It's pretty undeniable. Alright, the winner of this award is Inception, and the same stuff I said about the sound mixing applies to the sound editing as well. It's edited to match the action on the screen, and it does so in a very flawless manner, making this a very appropriate win for Inception. The nominees for Best Visual Effects are Iron Man 2, Hereafter, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, Alice in Wonderland, and Inception. Alright, now let's talk about Iron Man 2. And in terms of the visual effects, it's pretty hard to deny that of Iron Man 2. It looks really cool. You get to see more suits rather than just the classic Mark III from Iron Man 1. But yeah, one of the cool things about adding these new suits is you get to kind of have the VFX department show off by adding some more suit up sequences, which is one of the highlights of these movies. The best one in this one being that in the Monaco race fight scene. The suit up sequence there is pretty cool, and the visual effects department is doing a really good job, honestly. Alright, now moving on to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. All the visual effects in this movie do look really, really good. Nagini looks very convincing, Dobby looks great, and obviously there's all the magic, the spells, Death Eaters, and a whole lot of action scenes. The Polyjuice Potion scene with all the Harrys is also quite impressive. Overall, really great visual effects. But admittedly, not as great as the winner of this award, Inception. Okay, so Inception is kind of on a roll right now, and I must say, it is very deserved. Christopher Nolan famously likes to do things very practically, and while there are a lot of practical effects in this movie, there is also quite a bit of CGI. However, they blend together so well that it is so believable. All the truly crazy stuff is set in dreams, so the laws of physics and the limits of reality are kind of thrown out the window. The most obvious example of this is the scene where the world rolls up over itself, which is one of the most iconic shots from this movie. It's just so cool, and it's totally believable for something that shouldn't be as believable as this, but you really do believe it. On the topic of visuals, let's talk now about cinematography, the nominees being True Grit, The Social Network, The King's Speech, Black Swan, and Inception, with the only snub I want to mention here being Ensembles. Ensembles is a really, really nice movie. It looks super cool. All of Denis' movies I talked about them in the last video. Want to snub them here again. Ensembles looks beautiful. We'll talk about that movie later. But for the time being, let's talk about True Grit. Now, obviously, all the exteriors are very naturally beautiful. As they are in most westerns, and the way they shoot it certainly does a great job capturing that. On top of how all the external settings look, the interiors are also framed up, blocked, and especially lit very well. The movie is very pleasing to look at from beginning to end. Roger Deakins is one of my favorite cinematographers. He has frequently worked with the Coen brothers as well as Denis Villeneuve, and he's actually won several Oscars, and although this isn't one of them, the nominee was very much deserved. Okay, now let's talk about The Social Network. So I would low key be down with this one winning. Low key. I do think it's shot pretty impeccably. The use of focus and blur contrast is really, really great. Managed to smoothly direct the audience's attention while also bringing out the detail in what we're seeing. On top of that, the light is just wonderful. The lighting. The movie has this very golden hue to it, which not only looks great, but could signify a sense of wealth, which, paired with the rather dark color palette gives a sense of greed, which literally just emulates off of the screen. It's really beautiful to look at. Okay, now let's talk about the King's Speech. So, the King's Speech is definitely pretty to look at, even if the color palette is comparatively stale. A lot of the shots are framed up in a very orderly manner. This movie just has super tidy and well put together look to it, which makes sense given the setting. The way it shoots architecture as well really highlights the detail in the production design, which we'll get to in a minute. Now, moving on to Black Swan. Black Swan is unique for the stark black and white color contrast that you have in the movie, which parallels really well the white swan and the black swan dichotomy that you have. I will say that most of this film's more dramatic shots are of the Swan Lake play itself, though the rest of the movie is not quite as memorable, nor does it have the same attention to focus as something like The Social Network or the winner of this award, Inception. While I said I would be down with a Social Network win, it's hard to pretend that Inception doesn't, deserve this award or the attention that this cinematography brought to it. Inception is shot with just such a great sense of scale. This movie can just floor you, and the cinematography definitely helps with that. There are shots up close that capture the great detail, as well as some of the lighting. It just looks spectacular, especially in some of the flashback sequences all around. The visual style is very beautiful to look at. The nominees for Best Art Direction are True Grit, The King's Speech, Inception, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, and Alice in Wonderland. Let's talk first about True Grit. So what's cool about True Grit is that the town they filmed in, they didn't erect all these buildings from scratch. Many of the buildings already existed and looked old enough to keep. They did have to make a few alterations to some of the buildings, but ultimately a lot of the front of the buildings are facades, which just cover up modern buildings that operated during the production of this movie, like the post office. That was just covered up in a facade, and the people who live nearby still would have to go and get their mail. It's pretty insane, actually. The main road is also huge, and they had to cover the entire thing in dirt so as to give it that old-timey appearance. Looked authentic, and they also had to pick off any leaves from the trees that were on the set because the movie is set in winter but not filmed in winter. Yeah, it's pretty impressive what's going on here. Overall, there is just a lot of commitment, and the sets do look undeniably wonderful. But now, let's talk about The King's Speech. Now, this movie has sets that require a great sense of intricacy and royalty to them. The big exception to this is Lionel's place, which still looks great. I don't know why, but I am particularly driven to his back wall. Something about it just looks really, really cool to me. I don't know. But yeah, most of it has great beauty to the architecture. Sometimes have art even coinciding with it, like giant paintings hanging on the walls. It just really fits the movie's general vibe. Okay, now their unique pull here, Inception. Not that unique, I should say, but in terms of its um, engineering, it's distinct from the other nominees. It actually reminds me of when I was talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey, which has the sets that would rotate. The same thing is happening here in order to kind of play with gravity. Instead of having the actors hook up to strings, they just built a hallway that just rotates, and then they can film it from one side so that it looks like the hallway is staying still, and they're the ones that are kind of defying gravity. It works really, really, really well, even though it's more than just that one hallway. There is quite a few sets here that, while that's the most memorable one, there are others that look pretty great and have a unique design to them. All right, now let's move on to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1, which, although, so they don't go to Hogwarts in this movie, and that gives the art direction a unique chance to diversify itself. We do get to see the Burrow, though, as well as Privet Drive, which is sometimes a set, as well as the Wedding Tent, which looks great. The Ministry of Magic alone contains a lot of really cool sets. I want to take a moment to appreciate not just the architecture of the Ministry of Magic, well, which we've seen before in previous films like The Order of the Phoenix, but also there are sculptures added to this set that add to the art direction. However, I really want to point out the details in the Malfoy Manor. You get a better look from behind the scenes footage, but the movie is so dark during these scenes, but it is a great set. All that being said, my favorite sets are those from the Ministry of Magic. And no, I have not seen Alice in Wonderland, I'm afraid. But let's talk now about costume design. The nominees being True Grit, The Tempest, The King's Speech, I Am Love, and Alice in Wonderland. Let's talk first about True Grit. There's a really great attention to detail in True Grit. The main cast has great costumes, as well as what's cool about period pieces, all the extras, all the background characters. Everyone has to have very accurate costumes, and this is one of those movies that pulls it off believably and has really, really great impact in that regard. It's not like I was impacted like, oh my gosh, the extras costume, but you notice it, especially if you look at the behind the scenes stuff. They do a really great job, and it's worth mentioning here. All right, now let's talk about The King's Speech. So this is also a period piece. However, it is a bit more modern and not nearly as rustic. It is extremely refined, and you can see that in the costumes. Obviously, the ceremonial kingly uniform looks great, but everything really flaunts the elite nature of British royalty from the 1920s and 30s. Really great stuff, honestly. It looks really, really nice. Yeah, there's just a lot going on here, but it's quite beautiful. Okay, the makeup nominees are The Way Back, Barney's Version, and The Wolfman. So I've actually not seen any of these, I'm afraid. I kind of expected maybe Black Swan could get in here, but no, I haven't seen any of these nominees, so I don't really have anything to say, which means I'm going to move on to the next category, film editing. The nominees being 127 Hours, The King's Speech, The Fighter, Black Swan, and The Social Network. Okay, the editing in 127 Hours is one of the first things I noticed about it. It might actually be my favorite thing about the movie. It manages to keep this flow to it. It just is so easy to watch because it keeps this energy in a movie that could have very easily been boring, especially with how stagnant it becomes in terms of its like location. You don't really leave this one spot, spoilers, but it just manages to, it makes simple stuff like him like unloading his backpack feel quick and energetic. It's just really, really effective at what it does. And before he gets trapped there, obviously him bouncing around and like biking and swimming and jumping is like, it just keeps up with him. You're following a very energetic person, and it does the same thing by being energetic itself and keeping up with him and his pace. While it does slow down when he stops moving, it doesn't really, the editing is still very, very effective. Okay, let's talk about The King's Speech. So, while this movie is far from being poorly edited, it does not carry the same memorable, energetic flow as something like 127 Hours. While they are extremely different movies, and it's proper that The King's Speech had its own unique style to its editing, I do think it would be a bit more exciting if this were swapped out for something like Inception, which I'm going to call out as a snub right here. The fact that Inception wasn't nominated for film editing, I don't know what to do with that. That's crazy. It definitely deserves it. It's really well edited. It's pretty unbelievable that it's not here actually. So that is a snub. All right, now let's talk about The Fighter. The Fighter does a really good job, the editing of cutting to intercutting scenes. The best example of that being the arrest scene. That scene is really, really, really well edited. Um, but yeah, it's a very watchable movie from beginning to end, and the editing plays unmistakable role in that. The editing in Black Swan can actually feel rather disorienting at times. I do think this is the desired goal of the editor, and the main example that I would use to point this out is when Nina goes out to the bar with her friend, and by the end of it, you're not totally sure what happened. You're not sure if what she thought happened was you're not sure what's real. You're not sure what may have been imagined or what may have been drugged. Yeah, a lot of different things go into that, but yeah, the editing in the club scene certainly played a major role in making that possible. All right, the winner of this award is The Social Network, and I gotta say, it is so good to see this movie win. It definitely deserves the editing win. It the way it covers the events of the movie, just does so spectacularly. The way it's cutting between the multiple lawsuits going on against Mark Zuckerberg in this movie, while also covering the events that they're transpiring themselves. It's done so tactfully. It's not like this is the first time or last time that something like this has been done. It had been done before this, it's been done after this, but very few movies have done it as tastefully as The Social Network has. Also, just like the beginning of the movie, you get a real sense of what it's going to be like. The scene where Mark is kind of making the site to rate girls, it carries an impeccable energy to it, as well as cutting that over the monologue of him kind of explaining what he's doing while he spreads his influence. It's just, mwah, it's beautiful. The nominees for Best Actress in a Supporting Role are Jackie Weaver in Animal Kingdom, Haley Steinfeld in True Grit, Helena Bonham Carter in The King's Speech, Amy Adams in The Fighter, and Melissa Leo in The Fighter. Snub, I'm not sure who I'd move out for this, but I wanted to at least mention uh, Maricel Alvarez from Beautiful. She's very, very good in that movie. She steals the show a couple of times. So, yeah, I wanted to point her out. But without further ado, let's talk about Jackie Weaver in Animal Kingdom. So, being the only woman in this crime family, she has this unique matriarchal role that she plays. She's able to like pull the strings while playing this sweet motherly figure, but it can also be rather conniving at times in a way that she feels like she's playing off the other people in a way that makes her feel like she's always at least somewhat in control of the conversation she's in. Yeah, pretty impressive work actually. Okay, Haley Steinfeld in True Grit is, I actually saw her as more of a co-lead than a supporting role. It is, after all, her mission that we're following. She has the opening monologue and the closing monologue. She's the character we spend a whole lot of time with. So I feel like they did her a little bit dirty by putting her in supporting actress, but I digress. Ultimately, she handles herself really well in the settings that you wouldn't expect for a 14-year-old girl to be in, and she's giving a very memorable performance alongside more seasoned and recognizable actors like Jeff Bridges and Matt Damon, and Josh Brolin. But yeah, ultimately her best scene is probably when she's negotiating her horse prices. um, she is just a joy to watch in that scene. She's just really, really good. I would actually I can see her winning. She is very young though. It's very rare for people this young to win Oscars, but hey, she's really great. All right, Helena Bonham Carter in The King's Speech. So The King's Speech came out. I mean, this came out the same year as Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part One, in which she plays Bellatrix Lestrange. And if that ain't range, I don't really know what is, because I mean, you guys know Bellatrix. I'm assuming you know Bellatrix Lestrange. She's insane. But Helena Bonham Carter, she's very delightful. She's easy to support and root for, especially because she's very supporting, as a wife to her husband, who's the lead. But even though he's the lead and she's in a more supporting role, there's actually quite a few scenes where you're looking at him from her perspective. So you really get a sense for her character and what she's feeling in this movie. She's very, very memorable and very likable. What I love about Amy Adams' performance in The Fighter is that she really holds her own, even when she's getting ganged up on, which happens quite a few times. She never really fails to match the energy of her opponents, and stand up for herself. And she refuses to take any BS from the sisters or the mother, who is played by Melissa Leo, who actually won this award for the same movie, for The Fighter. So let's talk about Melissa Leo. I'm not actually sure how I feel about this win. I know how I feel about the performance. That's not in question. It's spectacular. But really, all of these performances are really wonderful in their own right, which makes them hard to compare at times. But yeah, Melissa Leo is doing a spectacular job disappearing into a completely different role, and it's more than just the accent. She pretends to care about her family above all else, but is ultimately very abusive, extremely intrusive, and yeah, I do really like whenever an antagonist, a villain, gets an Oscar, because it just kind of shows that the importance of that the impact of an antagonistic character can have on a movie. And yeah, she's really, really wonderful in this one. The nominees for Best Actor in a Supporting Role are Geoffrey Rush in The King's Speech, Mark Ruffalo in The Kids Are All Right, Jeremy Renner in The Town, John Hawkes in Winter's Bone, and Christian Bale in The Fighter. I would be down to see Andrew Garfield here from The Social Network, but that didn't happen. So without further ado, let's jump right into Geoffrey Rush from The King's Speech. Now, I discovered partway through my rewatch of this movie that he's Captain Barbossa. I didn't realize that, and which is insane because it just threw me for a wallop. I had no idea, but when I was watching it, it just hit me, and I realized that's pretty extraordinary range. It's hard to find two characters that are so different yet played so beautifully in both instances by the same actor. I wasn't used to seeing Geoffrey Rush in such a posh and polite manner, but he really just manages to separate his character from his more famous role and fully embrace Lionel in every capacity. Okay, now let's talk about Jeremy Renner in The Town. So he got nominated 2 years in a row, the last one being for The Hurt Locker, which we talked about in the last episode, but this time for a supporting role in the movie The Town. So, yeah, in both movies, he does kind of play a character who's quite serious, but lacks self-control and is ultimately extremely reckless. That certainly was a similar role in The Hurt Locker, and The Town is not too different, even though they as characters are much more different on a moral and organized level. Needless to say, he does a really good job, and especially given what the performance is supposed to be, he's pretty on point. Okay, so Jeremy Renner is, of the three nominees I've seen, probably my least favorite, followed by Geoffrey Rush, who's very memorable. But I am very in favor of the winner of this award, which is Christian Bale from The Fighter. He's just totally delusional, and he sees the best in himself, even though he's got a lot of stuff that's not the best, I'll say. But he kind of ignores the worst, his own downfalls, but believes in the best stuff, and he assumes that what he sees in himself is what everyone else sees in him as well, which makes the scene in the prison very, very engaging to watch. The scene where he's watching the documentary that they made about him, that he thinks is about his comeback and how awesome he is, but is actually about like just what drug addiction can do to you. And there's that kind of the realization that sets in that this is how the world sees him. That's a really great scene. He's super memorable in this movie, and I think very deserving of the Oscar. It's Christian Bale, after all. The nominees for Best Actress in a Leading Role are Michelle Williams in Blue Valentine, Jennifer Lawrence in Winter's Bone, Nicole Kidman in Rabbit Hole, Annette Bening in The Kids Are All Right, and Natalie Portman in Black Swan. I've only seen two of these, so let's start off with Blue Valentine, in which Michelle Williams plays off Ryan Gosling really well. They really complement each other's performances here. She's having to play a wide range of emotions as we navigate what her character is going through in the situation that she's in with her husband. She has different periods of her life, some where she experiences joy of falling in love, and that contrasts where she is later in life, where she just seems to be a bit dead inside and a bit done with everything that's been going on. This makes way for great sadness and a whole lot of anger and frustration and uncertainty, all of which is handled really, really well by Michelle Williams. I was quite impressed. I've seen Natalie Portman in many movies, so it is quite satisfying to see her win an Oscar for something that she does truly carry on her back, that being Black Swan, obviously. But it's also a performance that's quite saddening to behold, especially because everyone in her life in this movie, her co-stars, her boss, her mom, her friends, all of them are just a source of hardship for her. She has nobody else really to turn to, And so she just kind of has to take that with her wherever she is, and you can kind of always see that kind of broiling underneath the surface of the performance. It's quite good. Natalie Portman is very talented. All right, turning now to actor in a leading role. The nominees are James Franco in 127 Hours, Jesse Eisenberg in The Social Network, Jeff Bridges in True Grit, Javier Bardem in Beautiful, and Colin Firth in The King's Speech. All right, this is a pretty solid lineup, but I do want to throw out some snubs here. The first one being Leonardo DiCaprio from Shutter Island. That's a movie that is very good, and Leonardo DiCaprio is crazy in it. But I also want to mention Ryan Gosling in Blue Valentine. We just talked about Michelle Williams. Ryan Gosling is also really, really good. So it would have been cool to see him here. But like I said, not sure who I'd swap them out for given how stacked this lineup is. Starting first, let's talk about James Franco in 127 Hours. What's funny about this is that this is the same year that James Franco was hosting the Oscars. And although he's really funny because he famously did a terrible job hosting and had just dead eyes, and it's super ironic considering this is happening while he's being honored for what's a pretty crazy performance. Actually, we spend so much time with him in this movie and no one else that we start to really feel his pain, his hunger, his anxiety, his thirst. It's very rare that you get so much one-on-one time with one actor in a movie. So because he's kind of the one taking us through this story, it is quite impressive he's able to pull off and accurately portray this very inspiring survival story. Okay, Jesse Eisenberg was born to play Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network. He not only looks a decent amount like him, but he manages to talk in that super fast-paced and matter-of-fact manner that it's just so very believable. Although the internet likes to make jokes about Mark Zuckerberg not showing emotion, being a robot or a lizard person or whatever, those are all nice and funny, but Jesse Eisenberg is delivering anything but an emotionless performance. Although his performance is very facts-driven rather than emotionally driven, he's really, really good, very memorable in this movie. My favorite scene from him specifically being the one where he tells the orator at the court at the trial that he is undeserving of his full attention. That scene is really, really good. All right, let's talk about Jeff Bridges in True Grit. And what I want to say first is that because facial expressions are such an important, pivotal element of acting, and the eyes are arguably the most important, being kind of the window to the soul, you'd think having an eye patch covering up part of your performance would hinder you. But that's the last thing that happens with Jeff Bridges, who's giving a really great performance the whole time. Before we even see him, we actually hear his voice, and you can tell from that, just from hearing his voice, like, oh yeah, he's giving it his all, and we're in for a very good performance, and that's exactly what we get. All right. In the film Beautiful, only a few years after Javier Bardem's Oscar-winning performance in No Country for Old Men, he now takes on not the antagonistic role, but rather the lead role, and it's a really nice change of pace for him. There's a lot of subtlety to the performance. There's a lot of realism. It's not actually all that flashy compared to some of the other performances here, but it is very heartfelt and very down to earth. All right, in The King's Speech, I'm not sure how much of the stammering and stuttering was determined by the screenplay and how much was done by Colin Firth. But what he's doing sounds very natural, like in the sense that it's not a fake stutter. It sounds very. He nails it. I also want to take a second to appreciate the gradual deterioration of the stutter as it not goes away but fades and becomes a bit more manageable and under control as the film goes on. He does a really good job kind of. You don't notice the change because it happens gradually, but where he is at the beginning and end of the movie in terms of his stammer is very, very different. But there's not a point in the movie where you're like, whoa, he just changed up. It's very gradual, and I think that's really impressive, and it takes a lot of talent to do that. His relationships also affect him very visibly. His familial relationships with, his wife, his father, his brother, which can be very tense at times, but also his professional and eventually friendly relationship with Lionel, which is the most important relationship in the movie. It affects him on his face, and you can see it all on his performance visually, and also hear it in the alteration of his stammer throughout the movie. All right, let's talk about original screenplay. The nominees being The Kids Are All Right, Inception, The Fighter, Another Year, and The King's Speech. Only snub I'm gonna throw out here is Blue Valentine. That's a screenplay movie, and it really carries it through. That and the performances, which we've already talked about, really great screenplay. But let's start first with Inception. So Inception is extremely original. It's very creative. I just love it. It can be rather confusing, but I was able to follow what was going on. And that's what's great about Christopher Nolan, who you will soon learn I have absolutely nothing but love for. Actually, this is the first Nolan movie we've talked about. Yeah, we're going to see a lot of him. I love him. Hard not to. But yeah, he doesn't make anything that you can just turn on in the background. All of his movies are designed to have you get utmost attention to it. That's the way I feel like movies should be. Like lock in and experience this piece of art. But what I will say that I think holds the movie back a bit is the fact that it's a bit exposition heavy in the first half. Now, I will say, because the concept of dream sharing, extraction, and inception are so complicated and very thoroughly thought out, it does require a good amount of exposition to kind of explain and also show how this technology works. So I do think it's necessary, and it allows the second half of the movie to be honestly just one of the best things I've ever seen. I love the second half of this movie, and the first time I watched this movie, I also really loved the first half because I was learning about this thing, and it was such a cool thing to kind of discover as it goes through. But because it's so exposition heavy, I think the rewatches can become a little bit monotonous in the first half, which holds it back a little bit. But overall, I do just love the concept and originality and creativity of the screenplay. So while this movie is called The Fighter, it actually doesn't have as much emphasis on the boxing scenes as you would expect for a boxing movie. I actually kind of expected it to be a little bit more like the movie Warrior, which came out a few years after this one, and put more emphasis on the fighting itself, even though it had familial undertones. This movie really focuses itself onto the family matter at hand, which actually I think makes the movie much more interesting and much better, and also gives kind of a double meaning to the title of the movie, The Fighter, because as you start to question who he's really in conflict with throughout the movie. While the direction of the King's Speech can be a little bit predictable at times, it's also quite impactful. The best thing about the writing is the progression of the relationship between King James VI and Lionel. They did a really good job. It's obviously super important. Their relationship is kind of the hinge, the focal point of the movie. So they have to handle it well, and they do. It can be a little posh at times, but it's quite memorable, and I think a very well constructed screenplay. The nominees for Best Adapted Screenplay are Winter's Bone, True Grit, Toy Story 3, 127 Hours, and The Social Network. Let's talk first about True Grit. This movie really blurs the lines between justice and revenge, making for an altogether captivating watch. The opening monologue, the closing monologue, and the fun back and forths between our trio of very different characters makes for a really delightful Western that is both based on a novel and also a remake of a previous adaptation. The best Toy Story movie, in my opinion, Toy Story 3, does an amazing job concluding the trilogy. I know that they've made more movies since then, but for quite some time, this was it, and oh boy, was it a good one. I first saw this movie as a kid when I was 6 years old, and you know what? This movie's genuinely pretty scary. The incinerator scene at the end is insane enough, but Big Baby will haunt your nightmares, and do not get me started on the monkey. Do not get me started on that monkey. I really didn't expect this movie to become a full-blown prison escape movie, but you know what? I'm here for it. Although I did like this movie as a kid, even though I found it to be rather scary, I even like it more as an adult now that I'm in college. It's a nice meditation on what it means to say goodbye to your childhood and the things that define them, while also giving the toys a fulfilled purpose, one that we have now seen lived out in the films that followed. While I couldn't see a movie like 127 Hours winning the award, which it didn't, it does do a really great job getting us to root for Aaron to the point where we can't walk away from the screen once we've started it. The editing certainly helps with that. But yeah, the script keeps things interesting while he's trapped, having no one else to talk to but the audience. It's interesting to see how he stimulates himself, keep himself from going crazy and ultimately comes to the decision that he does when survival calls for it. If you know, you know. Okay, the winner of this award was The Social Network, and I cannot express how happy I am that this is the case. It is extremely deserving. What's really interesting about this screenplay is that movies generally, uh, for every page of dialogue in their screenplay, it equates to about 1 minute of screen time in the movie. It's rough, but it is an estimate that generally is accurate. Now, The Social Network's screenplay is a dense 170-page script. Even though the film's runtime is only 121 minutes, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Jesse Eisenberg is able to speak so fast and confidently that he can blitz through a lot of dialogue quicker than most and make it sound fluid. But at the same time, the movie is able to unpack these themes surrounding friendship, loyalty, greed, honesty, and all the while having very snappy dialogue, making for an extremely engaging film. The directing nominees for this year are True Grit, The Social Network, The Fighter, Black Swan, and The King's Speech. Snubs. Want to mention Shutter Island as a snub. Didn't expect it to be here because it got nothing, which is crazy. But big snub, Inception. Should have been Christopher Nolan's time. He was on the up. He's one of the most popular. He still is, obviously. He's so good. But yeah, Inception should have got a directing nomination. That would have been very, very fitting. Okay, but when it comes to the directing of True Grit, it's pretty hard to argue with the Coen brothers, especially at this phase of their career. Like we said before, the movie looks absolutely gorgeous, and the performances are very memorable and effective all around. It's just a super well constructed movie from beginning to end. All right, let's talk about The Social Network, which just should have won this award. Uh, yeah, David Fincher's style just shines through on the performances and the dark tone of the movie, the golden visual hues. It's just a uniquely dark energy that just comes off the screen. Not quite the same darkness you'd find in one of Fincher's movies like Seven, but there's an undertone of corruption and betrayal that just lurks. It is the best movie here. It has such a unique vibe and a really great one that should have won David Fincher a directing Oscar. Okay, The Fighter. Yeah, I respect it. It would be pretty hard to deny that there's some really great work being done here. Three actors were nominated for awards from this movie, and while that shows not only the talent of the actors themselves, as well as that the casting director is doing a really good job, it points to a very talented director helming it all at the end of the day. Okay, Black Swan. This movie does a good job placing you in the shoes, the ballet slippers of Nina, and everything that she's going through, her fear, anxiety, her goals. Now, is the metaphor of like beating yourself up and killing yourself to achieve something or some greatness? Is that a bit too on the nose? Yes, I would say so. It is a bit too on the nose, but it does get the point across at the end of the day. Okay, the winner of this award was The King's Speech. And no, just no. I like this movie. It's a well directed movie. Yeah, but is it the best? No, maybe I'd be less harsh if it were just a nominee, but it's not. It's the winner, and that simply should not be the case. I'll be the first to admit that the cinematography, the score, the performances are all very good. But remember how I said like The Social Network has this super unique vibe that there's not much else that feels too similar to it? That's not the case with The King's Speech. The King's Speech ultimately feels a little bit like Oscar bait, not in the sense that it is that there's not good work being done here, that it's not a good movie. It is, but it's kind of in the same line as something like Darkest Hour or Lincoln, which is not bad. In fact, it's quite good, but is just an uninteresting choice for the Academy when the award could have gone to something better and more deserving like The Social Network. Speaking now about Best Foreign Language Film, the nominees are Outside the Law, Hors la Loi, Incendies, Dogtooth, Beautiful, and In a Better World. Let's talk first about Incendies, which is rather early in Denis Villeneuve's career, but the style is very present, and the quality of this film points to the growth as a filmmaker, that the filmmaker that he would eventually become. Some of my favorite movies are helmed by him, so it's not surprising to see that even this early in his career, he's making movies that are this good. He's probably my favorite director visually, at least. Whenever he makes a movie, the big thing you can count on is that the visuals are gonna pop off at you. He knows how to handle blocking and focus better than most, and it really shows here. He would perfect the aspect of his craft as he got more experienced, but this movie does look insane. It's also a very emotional and dark story. He doesn't require massive budgets and VFX uh, to make amazing films. I know that some of his more recent films, like Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and the Dune movies, of course, um, all have those, but at this phase in his career, which includes films like Prisoners and Polytechnique, he doesn't really need them, and I think that shows through perfectly in this movie. Okay, Beautiful is the first movie we've talked about on this channel that was directed by Alejandro Iñárritu. Now, I've only seen two of his movies, this one, and then the first movie I saw from him was The Revenant, which is an extremely different movie and one that we'll talk about in the next video. But, well, I'll have to watch more of his movies in order to really pinpoint his style, because they're quite different, these movies. Well, what I will say is that it's very clear this is a director who's extremely talented. I don't want to spend the whole time on both foreign language DOMs talking just about the directors, especially because the performances are what really shine through in this movie. Marisol Alvarez steals the show at times, which I said earlier, and of course I've already talked about Javier Bardem and how memorable he is. And furthermore, there is a sense of realism in the cinematography that manages to be pleasing to look at, but not too showy, that you're pulled out of the scene. Additionally, the way that the ending manages to loop back to the beginning makes for a pretty lasting impact that serves the overall narrative quite well. Although I do think this is quite a good movie, I can't pretend that it really competes with a movie like Incendies in my book. The nominees for Best Animated Feature Film are The Illusionist, How to Train Your Dragon, and Toy Story 3. A little bit surprised that Tangled wasn't here. There's also only 3 nominees. If there were 5 like there was in the last episode, we'd almost certainly be talking about Tangled here. But without further ado, let's talk about The Illusionist. This film was adapted from a script that was written by Jacques Tati, so you might be a little surprised to hear that I actually was quite fond of this movie. The only other Jacques Tati film that I've reviewed on this movie was Mon Uncle, or My Uncle, which I really did not enjoy that much. So there's actually a cameo of that movie in this movie when the illusionist walks into a theater and that movie is being played. Even though I don't really enjoy that movie, I did quite enjoy that scene, that cameo. It was quite funny and it made me smile. Although I have only seen one Tati film, I do see a lot of his fingerprints on this one, especially with the main character, the illusionist himself, who doesn't really speak much. He acts a lot like the uncle from Mon Uncle, actually. But I don't know why. Maybe I'm just able to buy into. I think it works better in an animated setting. I'm just a bit able to buy into the character more, which I couldn't do for My Uncle for some reason. But yeah, I quite enjoyed The Illusionist, and the animation definitely helps with that. It is completely gorgeous to look at. Every frame of this movie looks like a work of art. It's a very beautiful movie that I quite enjoyed. And I know it sounds like I'm glazing. I'm not like in love with this movie, but it is very enjoyable and a pretty fun short watch. Okay, so How to Train Your Dragon is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It's one of my favorite movies of this decade, honestly, of the 2010s, and it's easily one of my favorite movies of the year. Um, Overall, this was a pretty good year for animated movies, but this movie plays a huge role in making that a possibility. The musical score we've already talked about is one of the best of all time. It's a very sincerely emotional movie with a very satisfying ending, and it's all about relationships, and all the relationships in this movie are so easy to get behind. You know, Hiccup and Toothless, which is kind of the leading one, but that kind of propels into healing his relationships with his father. It kind of builds up the relationship between him and Astrid, all of which just are so satisfying and it's so pleasing. It's a lot of stories rolled up into one. It's about relationship. It's an underdog story. It's about listening and understanding. All the while, there's just great action and adventure along the way. I just absolutely treasure and adore this movie. All right, the winner of this award was Toy Story 3. And while I would have voted clearly for How to Train Your Dragon, there's no world where this was going to anything other than Toy Story 3. I mentioned in the last video that there's only been 3 animated films that have ever been nominated for Best Picture. We talked about Up in the last one, and this is the last one. The very next year, Toy Story 3 got nominated for Best Picture, which I'm all for, deserves it, but it ultimately kind of did the same thing that Up did to last year's animated picture race, where it ruined it by making it only one of them was nominated for Best Picture. Toy Story 3 did that to this year's animated feature race, which is unfortunate. It makes it a little bit uninteresting. But yeah, I mean, Toy Story 3 is a wonderful movie. All right, last but not least, the nominees for Best Picture are Winter's Bone, True Grit, Toy Story 3, The Social Network, 127 Hours, The Kids Are Alright, Inception, The Fighter, Black Swan, and The Social Network. I haven't seen The Kids Are Alright or Winter's Bone, but I want to mention first some snubs. I want to mention How to Train Your Dragon. Snub really should have been here. Would have made this race cooler, I think, a little bit. It also would have made the animated feature race way more interesting. This is one of the best movies of the year, I think, easily. It should have been here. Also want to mention Shutter Island, which got nominated for literally nothing, which is crazy because it's a great movie. And lastly, Ensembles, which we've talked about quite a bit already. All right, now let's talk about True Grit. I really like this movie. I was super into it, and it definitely deserves the nomination. I didn't even realize when I was watching it that it was a Coen movie. But once I saw the names at the end, I was kind of like, that actually makes a lot of sense because they're great directors, and this is a great movie. Okay, Toy Story 3 is a pretty historic and deserving Oscar nomination. It's the only animated sequel to ever get nominated. So this is kind of an anomaly. It's really cool to see though. It definitely deserves the nomination, and I do think it's the best movie in a series that, quite frankly, doesn't even have a bad movie. Okay, The Social Network is not quite my favorite nominee, but dang, it's close. I can someday see it maybe becoming my favorite. Actually, the fact of the matter is that the possibilities for winners came down mostly between this and The King's Speech, and between those two, The Social Network is easily the better of the two. 127 Hours is totally thrilling and very engaging. It also gets quite emotional near the end. It was low key bringing me to tears just with how satisfying of yeah, I felt like a weight had been lifted off that I'd been kind of dealing with for like the last hour of the movie. Um, yeah, I honestly love this movie quite a bit more than I thought I was going to. It was really a good time. The Fighter is really good. Already talked about how good the directing, performances, and acting are. Yeah, I don't really have too much to say that I haven't said already. It's a really good time. While Black Swan isn't quite a standard horror movie, it is the closest thing we've seen so far to a horror movie getting nominated for Best Picture. And like, yeah, it is a horror movie. It would be pretty hard to deny that. But it also leans very heavily into the thriller side of the genre. I know some people that outright dislike this movie. I do like this movie. I thought it was pretty good, but ultimately in the future, if I want to watch a movie about the self-harm that can come from an unhealthy desire to master a skill, craft, or art to the point where it becomes self-damaging to both your mental and physical health, I'm just going to watch Whiplash instead. Okay, just realized I skipped over Inception somehow, which is crazy because it's my pick actually. Obviously, The Social Network is like right behind it, but this is pretty much an all timer. It used to be my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. It's since dropped down to like my fifth favorite, which is insane considering how much I do still just love this movie. He just makes bangers. That's all I can say. But yeah, it's unfortunate that this wasn't a heavier Best Picture contender, given that it's pretty much a classic at this point. Okay, now talking about the actual winner, The King's Speech. I like this movie. I do, but honestly, most of the options I've just talked about are simply more interesting. It's just a super safe pick and rather Oscar baity. Not Oscar baity in the sense that it's actually lacking artistic merit. That's not the case. It's quite good, but it simply aligns with stuff that the Academy likes, to the point where you can tell while they were making it, they were definitely planning, like, yeah, we're going to get some awards for this movie. And you know what? I mean, it worked. But it's just sad because I'm not even mad about the nomination. Like, it's deserving of that, I guess, but it's just the win. There's better movies like Inception and The Social Network, which I'm glazing at this point. I like The King's Speech. There's more interesting Best Picture winners though. All right, and that is that. Now, tune in for the next video, which is going to be covering the 88th Academy Awards, which honors films released in 2015. And if I do say so myself, this on average might have the best average Best Picture nominee quality. Like, the lineup of Best Picture nominees for 2015, really good. So go watch movies from 2015, and I'll see you in the next one.